Hey, this week we're talking gaming, but on the M1 running Linux. Then we talk about Linux apps on Android. We get a quick talk about Thunderbird on Android, then NVIDIA playing nice with Wayland. Oh, and the big release of Ubuntu 24.10, and lots more. You don't want to miss it, so stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is the Untitled Linux Show, episode 173, recorded Saturday, October the 12th. Nobody Gnomes. Hey folks, it is Saturday. It's time to get geeky with Linux, open source, probably some gaming, and I don't know, who knows what all else. Before the show, we were talking about 3D printing and all sorts of fun stuff. It's the Untitled Linux Show, and it is a lot of fun. It is, of course, not just me. We've got Rob, we've got David, we've got Jeff. Ken worked a ridiculous number of hours and is off trying to sleep right now. Best of luck to him for that, and we'll have Ken back, I'm sure, in a week or two. But guys, welcome.
Good to be here.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, it is time to talk Linux, and I saw a tweet this week, and it was kind of funny because somebody says something on Linux on Mac is now officially running native. And it's like, you're running that inside of wine. That's not exactly native anymore. This is sort of the same thing, though, isn't it, Rob? There's some interesting things going on in the M1, M2 world with running Linux on Macs.
Yes. So, in my own social media feed, I often see an ad for Parallels Desktop on the new M1, M2 Macs. And the ad shows a sad person that can't run games on their Mac. And then it shows a happy person because now they can run games on their Mac with Parallels. I think the headline is something about now you can run Windows games on your Mac. And often I go in those comments because I'm a troll like that, and I put, no, I'm good. I just install Linux and I can run games on my Mac just fine. Well, in all honesty, I don't have Linux running on a Mac yet because I haven't been donated enough money to get a Mac to put Linux on. But although nobody has ever called me out on the comment that I put on there, I forget about the part that the new Macs are ARM, and Windows games run great on Linux, but Linux on ARM is another issue to overcome. But, we shared rumors recently, I don't know, a couple episodes, I want to say it is, that it sounded like Valve was working on just this problem. So this week, it appears maybe Valve wasn't the only ones working on this. So although this fix solution uses Steam, I'm not seeing any credits mentioned on their involvement on this. What I did see is Alyssa Rosenzweig. We haven't talked about Asahi for a while, but Alyssa, she's one of the developers of that. Mainly, I think she does a lot of the graphics work on the Asahi Linux, which being the Linux distro made to run on the M1, M2 Macs. So anyway, she posted this week that on the Fedora Asahi remix for the M1, M2 Macs, you can now play Windows games with Linux on Steam. But this must be kind of difficult, right? That's at least what all the commenters on the previous story I said, or we talked about said, and it's like, yeah. But if you think doing DNF install Steam is hard, then yes, I guess it is. But it is really just as easy as it is on any other Linux distro. Apparently, it works well. Maybe one of the only caveats I saw on there is that you are going to want at least 16 gigabytes of RAM to do it. So the open source Honeycrisp Vulkan driver for Apple Silicon M1, M2 within Mesa and related work as part of the Asahi Linux project provides a nice Linux gaming experience atop the ARM-based Apple devices. At least that's what Melissa says. And as the rumor was for Valve testing on ARM, Asahi is also using FEX, that's FEX, as the translation layer from x86-64 to ARM. So the stack goes fex emulates to emulates x86 on ARM, then wine translates Windows into Linux, and then DXVK and VKD3D-Proton translates DirectX to Vulkan. So I know when we shared the Valve story, I thought this was early days and early testing, and it would be quite a while before we actually saw some benefits. I know we had some discussion on the show, and I think maybe I said this year or next year. Some people said years out. I don't remember. There were people on the forums that said 10 years maybe. And my defense was, it doesn't matter if it works great today. It's the start. But, I think we really underestimated the technology. And the person's comments saying, it was months away. I think the most optimistic person was saying it was months away. And I think it was even closer than they thought, since, they've got it going on the M1s, M2s. Sounds like it works pretty smooth and pretty slick, even with all those layers there. So I think our ARM future is upon us.
Yeah, that is really quite impressive. Something related that comes to mind, there's a video by Jeff Geerling just recently where he slapped a big full-size video card onto a Raspberry Pi, the Pi 5, because it's got that exposed PCI Express port on it. You could do some fun things with that. I'll make sure and grab that URL, and we'll throw it in the show notes. Yeah, it's really coming along to where you can do some pretty interesting things. Yeah, it's real fascinating. And the thing that I love most about this is the Linux support is better for the Mac's GPU than the Mac support is.
Yep.
Like, Apple's like, no, we can't make OpenGL, whatever, 4.3 work on that. It's never going to happen. And yeah, it totally works with the Linux drivers. It's just hilarious to me.
Well, we talked about Mac came out with we're going to support gaming more, and kind of went, okay, here's some documentation. You guys take care of it. And
yeah,
they didn't really do much themselves other than say, have a good time,
Well, I mean, what they did is they said, we're going to support gaming more so long as people use Metal. And nobody uses Metal API. He's Vulkan now. It's pretty much everything.
That is a big difference between like Linux, Windows, and Mac OS. When Windows makes their thing, Apple makes their thing, and then they expect people to use their thing. Mm-hmm. Linux, makes their thing, and since a lot of people aren't going to make stuff work for them, Linux makes things work for them. You don't see Mac making other people's stuff work for them.
Yeah.
Or even Windows doing that. I mean, kind of, I guess, with WSL and stuff like that, but kind of.
Fun. All right, well, let's continue on the video card and a gaming train and chat about NVIDIA. And I guess specifically we're talking Wayland on NVIDIA, or an NVIDIA on Wayland. I'm not sure which way you would say that. Jeff, what's new?
Well, in Montreal this week at the Xorg Developers Conference, also known as XDC 2024, which is taking place right now. And at the conference, NVIDIA shared a roadmap outlining their plans for Wayland and encouraged Wayland compositors to target the Vulkan API. Austin Schaefer and James Jones, who are part of the NVIDIA Linux team, presented on some of their recent Wayland driver features, namely explicit sync support, and they also shared slides on the future direction of the NVIDIA Linux driver. Now, the presentation was rather short, as it only encompassed 4 informational slides. I'm not counting the intro and exit slides that are, cover letters and whatnot. So, but they had a few slides, The first slide covered recent features and fixes for the year in review, and they said explicit sync has finally landed and both GL native and X-Wayland Vulkan are supported. Additionally, they brought up that EGL is on X-Wayland, and they mentioned that HDR color accuracy fixes are on the way. So they specifically mentioned they're continuing to work on reported issues, and so it's good news they're at least dedicated to squishing bugs and trying to drive things forward. The next slide was a roadmap slide where they went over the upcoming work. They want to ramp up their internal Wayland testing to have a better quality product when it ships. They're looking to support the upstream HDR color pipeline, DRM, UAPI, and they noted that the upstream proposal has limitations that conflict with NVIDIA hardware. So, and that is a little bit of a problem, but it doesn't seem like a complete showstopper. And they did mention the DRM HDR vendor properties will be exposed soon. So more to come there. It just might come a little slower than we hope just because of those hardware restrictions. They are also interested in internal display muxing on Wayland, but they know compositors need to support multi-GPU scan-out to implement display muxing. And additionally, they're looking to enable the NVIDIA DRM FDB dev equals 1 and the mode set equals 1 kernel module parameters by default. So no more having to go into your boot command and set some of those to make things work right. The third slide covered problems encountered or pain points during the development. One issue was with remote desktop usage. They mentioned that the ease of use is very compositor dependent, and the use case they listed was, a fully remote, launch a session on a physical display locally and get remote access. The second major pain point was window management controls, which included things like automated window resizing, minimizing, maximizing, things like that. These features are either not very easy or possible to implement, and they did suggest potential solutions such as YDO tool or KDO tool, but they've also questioned whether there's actually a need for this in the community. They want to ensure they're focusing on what users actually want and not wasting time on unnecessary features that nobody actually cares about. And to that point, the final slide asked for feedback. They specifically inquired about which missing features would you like to see supported and what issues impact your experience currently on Wayland. They also request people either reach out and provide feedback either in person at the XDC conference, there's 4 actual people there from NVIDIA, or on the NVIDIA forums. So they want to hear what's important, what's, the most groundbreaking and what, or most impactful, so they can make sure they're working on that first. Take a look at the article linked in the show notes, as there are more details I didn't go over. And there's a link to the slides they presented along with a PDF linked in there where they explain why Vulkan is so much better to focus on than OpenGL. They really want to put everything to Vulkan. And, I'll be honest, I like where the future of Linux graphics is going. I mean, I think it's really becoming a lot better and really starting to mature.
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting things in there. I too like that everything is going Vulkan. It seems like it's a much simpler and more powerful way to do things than any of the other options.
The one thing is...
Yes.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I find it interesting that NVIDIA is talking about HDR on Wayland. It kind of makes me think that maybe we're getting closer to that being a little more official. Right now, the only way to get HDR on Wayland is to run KDE, and that's their Frog protocol. We talked about this a little bit in the past, that the Frog protocols are now sort of becoming the official, unofficial staging thing from Wayland. Hopefully, we're going to start seeing things. This is another one of those times where Valve stepped in and sort of kicked some people in the pants and said, let's get this done a little bit better than we're doing it. So hopefully that will, with NVIDIA on board, that'll happen. It'll be a thing. And then maybe even Google Chrome will support it. Like that's the big part that's missing right now to have a good HDR experience.
Well, and I think really if you look at it, so for those who don't know, Vulkan is a much lower level API than OpenGL. So just totally made up example is kind of OpenGL says, make a cube this size and put it on the screen, where Vulkan, you've got to, for example, draw each line. I mean, it's not actually real, but I mean, that's kind of a way you can think about it. But it's also a lot more universal. If you can write something in Vulkan, well, Windows can handle Vulkan, Linux can handle Vulkan, Mac, I don't know what they're up to, but a lot of stuff is supporting Vulkan, and it simplifies things. And then a lot of times developers like it because they can really have a lot of very fine-grained control to try to optimize their experience that they're giving to the user. It just is a little harder because you gotta know a little more what you're doing.
Yeah. So we've got an interesting thought here, and this sort of struck me. It's from one of our Discord users, SearchStrip. It says, I expect a native Xbox gaming for Linux in the near future to compete with Steam. And
Interesting.
That's quite the thought. It makes a certain amount of sense. What do you think? Are we going to see an Xbox handheld running Linux at some point?
Well, I think Microsoft would team up with Steam because they've already got the infrastructure. They get some licensing fees and some advertising money, and there's less work they have to do.
It is Microsoft we're talking about, though.
Yeah, and they've got a lot invested in their Xbox branding.
Yeah.
But they're already transitioning Xbox away from the console.
Like, I don't know if he's talking about, having a handheld or another console that's based on Linux. My interpretation, at least, you can correct me, is that he means like kind of like how you can have Xbox on your Windows desktop now. They have their Xbox software. You're not actually playing the console games. But I suspect he means more as in Xbox software running on your Linux desktop playing their games.
Yeah, but that then allows you to run it on the Steam Deck as well, and all of those things.
Sure.
It's just an interesting thought to me that maybe Microsoft's going to want to get in on this with the Xbox. But real fast.
And that's a native, but you can already do Xbox cloud streaming on Linux desktop or on the Steam Deck. I already tested it. Worked really well on the Steam Deck, and it felt native, even though it's actually really going through a web browser.
Wow, impressive.
Well, and I think I've even talked to some people at work, and we've talked about Linux or Microsoft kind of adopting Linux so they don't have to do so much development. And somebody said, well, what about all the legacy stuff that they need to run? Well, why wouldn't you have Microsoft branded Linux? I mean, they put their nice shiny template over the top, and for the actual Windows code, they just run it in a container, and it's an isolated little thing when actually most of the underlying operating system is based on Linux. I mean, similar to like what Mac did, where it's Unix, but they just put a shiny front end over the top, and then Microsoft can say, we can take all these developers for the kernel and just have them work on cloud and stuff and AI stuff, and we let the community handle the operating system, or we keep a quarter of the developers around for that.
Right. They could just make their version of Wine or help contribute to Wine, and then once they got their legacy covered, they can move to the future and just be Linux. But
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be unprecedented for Microsoft to use an existing open source software stack for part of their kernel. I mean, that's where the Windows NT network driver came from. It pretty much got lifted from one of the BSDs. Right? That's a real thing. That's not just a conspiracy theory, I think, at this point. That was actually confirmed at some point, I think.
Yeah.
Fact check me on that, guys. Let me know.
I think that's accurate.
I'm 99% sure you're correct in that. They kind of got caught with their pants down. But then I think it was like, well, but now we don't use it. It got rewritten or something. And
yeah, that sounds right. That's been a while ago.
It's all Linux underneath. That's why they won't open source it.
Oh, it's a Unix system. I know this.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think about it, it's actually a good money saving business plan to redirect your resources to higher value IP. Because at this point, Windows is pretty saturated. they're not going to grow their market share. They've already lost in the server and the big industrial sectors. It's like, okay, we're just changing the colors and redesigning a few things. What if we didn't have to do all that and we had it underneath? And for legacy, we have a little container, and then we don't even have to worry about security as much because it's contained in that container, whatever, like a Docker or whatever the cool kids containerize these days.
Yeah. We are getting comments saying that and this is what I just saw searching on the internet. Apparently, the Deck Alpha guys developed a lot of Windows NT, and they did borrow a lot from Unix at the time. So, fun stuff. Some interesting history there. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, see, weren't you the one that said the NT kernel could be Unix if they actually would have? It's like missing one feature, two features that keep it from being officially branded as Unix.
It is, I think the only thing, and this has been a long time ago, somebody said this, but I think it's fairly accurate. Windows NT is Unix compatible except for the way the fork system call works. But other than that, which is why you can take a piece of Unix code, you can take C or C++ code written for Linux, and you can cross-compile it on Windows using something like Cygwin, and it just works. You get an actual Windows binary. It's because there are a lot of those pieces that are compatible, that are there. So some interesting shared history there. But this is not the Untitled Windows Show. This is the Untitled Linux Show. What are we doing talking so much about Windows here? Let's talk about Linux. Let's talk about enterprise Linux. And David's going to take it away and tell us about Rocky Linux and apparently the cost of a support contract.
Yes. So I've got a link to an article from the Register about CIQ. And they have unveiled a version of Rocky Linux backed by service level objectives, indemnities for enterprises requiring more than the support of an enthusiastic community behind an operating system. They also have, so their surface level objectives are around remediation of CVEs and security updates. The legal indemnification protects against potential infringement claims related to open software and the distribution of supply chain validation for packages. But the interesting thing I find about this article is the fact that it is $25,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And Rocky is one of the competitors to Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So I was like, dang, that's a lot of change. How does that compare to RHEL? So I actually have a second link there to Red Hat's, the closest thing I could find to this. And it looks like, just with the numbers off the back of a napkin that I ran, that you would need to be somewhere in the 20 or 30 servers. Not just physical bare metal machines, but like virtual machine servers, before it would make sense to take this over just going with RHEL directly. Mm-hmm. Some of the other points that they make, which I think are interesting, is they're saying it as a positive. They mentioned that Open ELA, when I say they, CIQ in their press release mentions Open ELA, CIQ, Oracle, and SUSE joining forces to ensure a stable and resilient future for both upstream and downstream communities around the enterprise Linux. But the Register points out that it does seem to kind of indicate just continued fracturing in the enterprise Linux ecosystem since Red Hat, did what they did with CentOS and everything. So, hey, support is out there if you're willing to pay for it. It's not cheap, but there are a lot of options.
Yeah. Now, it is important to note that with Rocky and CIQ, this is not a per machine license. This is not a per core. This is a flat rate. And
yes, which is why around around 100 machines or so.
Yeah.
And it's definitely cheaper. So if you're huge, this is a heck of a lot cheaper.
Which actually kind of makes sense, because you probably don't need this unless you're that big, right? This isn't necessarily even specifically about support so much as it is the indemnification and all that stuff. Like this is sort of Rocky saying, we take the legal burden instead of you having to take it. There's some interesting things sort of legally wrapped up in that.
Yeah, and it's definitely on the legal side because this $25,000 price tag does not include support. It is just
$25,000 support contract. Asterisk does not actually include support.
Support is available separately, which also is press release speak for add additional cost.
No, of course.
So what kind of legal stuff? I mean, what? I don't.
It's the situation you get into where somebody like Oracle comes out and says, hey, that's my code that you're running on that server. Here's a bill for every instance of every core you're running. And you can say, no, I got this from CIQ. You go talk to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is the sort of thing it is. It sounds like there's some other things baked into that, like CVE stuff. They're going to do better support
they're guaranteeing a responsiveness and remediation for CVEs and getting security updates out and things like that. But
this is for a big business. This is for enterprise. Actually, it is specifically for enterprise. And this is for an enterprise that does not want to use software that is free. And we're not talking about the open source sort of freedom, not freedom sort of free, but beer sort of free. You've got some enterprises that's just not okay. They've got to have a contract. They've got to have a contract that they enter into to be able to run something. And so this is what that is for.
I'm just surprised support's not there too. But Jeff made a good point in the Discord for anybody who wants me to get the support contract. It will be 5,000 coffees
per year. Per year.
So 500 a month will get me well more than enough.
Yeah. Just to put the kind of the exclamation mark on this, if you look at that and go $25,000, it's that much. It's not for you. If that cost surprises you, it's not for you.
It's not for me.
And enterprise, depending on the size, some of that would be lost in the noise.
Oh, absolutely.
The amount of their power bill doesn't even begin. 25,000 wouldn't even begin to cover just their power bill
per month.
Yeah.
Can you imagine running a data center? How much their power bill? Like my power bill at my house with my 3 computers that run all the time is ridiculous. I don't want to even think about a full-on data center. It's got to be ridiculous.
Well, I think if you're just want a quick matter of scale, Microsoft has entered into a 20-year contract to spin up a nuclear reactor for their data center.
That's awesome.
There we go with Microsoft.
Yes, I realize that's a segue into Microsoft yet again. So you can go research that on your own time. But yeah, it's funny.
David, don't go Rob on us.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yes, that's right. I'm not replacing Rob today. I'm replacing Ken. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Just if you're at all curious, now it doesn't directly apply because they get industrial rates, but you're probably looking at 10 to 50 plus megawatts of power in a data center.
Yeah. How many just gigawatts is that?
Yeah. 0.5.
Oh, so not enough to run the DeLorean.
No, not enough.
Not enough. But I mean, if you want to just know the scale of, and there's bigger and smaller, but I mean, that gives you at least a power of 10 type thing, that the kind of power you're looking at, and not counting what you have to cool and all the other support stuff to go with it. That's strictly for the machines.
Yeah. All right, Rob, let's talk about Android. Android is Linux. Android is about to become a little bit more Linux, isn't it?
In some ways.
I think I might be excited about this. I've run Termux for the longest time, and it sounds like Android is getting in on that game.
Well, we'll see how you feel when I'm done. So, I mean, even for those who, don't use Chrome OS, it was still beneficial when Linux users, when Chrome OS began supporting running Linux apps. It meant there's more reason to develop for Linux. But and also, I mean, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Just stop and think about that. Chrome OS, it runs on Linux, and they were able to support running Linux apps. That's pretty awesome, I think. But the popularity of Chrome OS, that alone gave Linux app developers more reason to develop for Linux, as it helped the Linux desktop market to something like triple in size, I want to say. So now Google is planning to do it again. They are going to bring Linux apps to another OS of theirs that is based on Linux and can't run Linux apps today. So obviously I am talking about Android that Jonathan mentioned at the top of the show. Engineers at Google began work on a new terminal app for Android a couple of weeks ago as part of the Android virtualization framework, and contains a web view that connects to a Linux virtual machine via local IP, and this would allow you to run Linux commands from the Android host. It actually sounds a lot like Termux to me so far. So a patch this week to the Android source code, or the open source Android that is, added a new developer option called Linux Terminal, and it's under Settings System Developer Options. So right now it sounds like installing Debian still appears to, or Debian or some other distro, I guess, a bit of a manual process from what I read. They plan to improve that. And although much of this is early days, and much of this can already be done with Termux, like I said, this sounds very similar. If Google gets serious about this and builds the support right into the system to be more than it is today, maybe we could see some tighter integration. Just getting a little effects on here, and we'll be playing Windows desktop games on our Android phones before you know it.
So one of the things that's different between this and Termux is this is actually running like a full-on virtual machine, whereas Termux is just it's basically containerization, right? So everything that runs on Android is very heavily sandboxed, but it does not run in individual virtual machines. Whereas they're talking about making this an actual VM, which is pretty fascinating. And apparently this is coming for Android tablets. From one thing the article mentioned that it has been tested there with the Pixel tablet. So maybe Google is thinking about, wouldn't it be nice if we had a desktop mode for these Android tablets, and they're going to use Debian to make it happen? I don't know, maybe.
It sounds like it's a little bit further off than, say, running Windows games on an M1, M2 Mac. But like I said, I think it's it's early days, and just seeing a start in this direction could be a potentially good future. As long as they don't throw against the wall and decide to abandon it. But they seem to keep a lot of things with Android and Chrome OS, I guess, kind of.
Yeah. So a couple more thoughts about this. First off, the timing suggests that it could show up in Android 16. Now, it may be hidden. Like, you may have to go and tap the kernel version 5 times and then turn developer mode on and then be able to turn this on. But the guys reading the tea leaves, it seems like Android 16 is where this would land. And then one of the other interesting things that comes to my mind is they're putting it in AOSP, the Android open source project.
Yep.
And that means that it's going to be there by default in a whole bunch of different devices. So this could become quite ubiquitous. Like, it could just be in all the devices by default, which is really pretty interesting. I think that's pretty neat that it's going to be there. And then you kind of hope. At least my hope with this is, do they make it accessible to apps? So you could even imagine. So like when you set up WSL on Windows, you go to the Microsoft Store and you download a Linux distro through the store, and it does it. Well, then makes me think, well, is there a possible future where you go to the Google Play Store and you download a Linux distro for your phone? It's definitely not impossible. I could definitely see that being a thing. That's a pretty cool idea. So I do find this exciting. I think it's really cool. We shall see. We can hope.
Yeah, right there
Always
alongside all their third-party stores are going to have to allow now.
Yeah.
See this week in Google for that story.
Just so long as we make Apple provide for third-party stores as well, I will be okay with it. I have opinions on that one, but anyway.
Hey, I'm just going to say that is super disappointing that they ruled one way with Apple and then the other way with Google.
The one that's actually a problem, they ignored.
The fact that with Google, I mean, you can already sideload and all that stuff.
You can sideload a store.
Way. Yeah,
you can sideload a third-party store really trivially on Android. Yeah. Anyway, speaking of Android, this would be a great place to talk about Thunderbird on Android. So I am running Thunderbird on Android, which means I am running 2 copies of K9 Mail on Android. We talked about this a long time ago. This has been in development for a long time. So the folks at Mozilla decided that they wanted an official Thunderbird Mail client for Android. And rather than build their own from scratch, they found K9, which was an open source email client. And they said that they came to an agreement with the author of K9, the people that owned it. And K9, they said, was going to become Thunderbird. That's actually a thing now. And there is a Thunderbird for Android beta that you can go out and get a hold of. And, it's not bad. Like, it works pretty well. It works about like K9 did, with a little bit of a different theme to it. My one annoyance that it only will show 9 new emails at a time in your notifications is still there. And so that's sort of an interesting experience, so you swipe down, you got your notifications, you have 9 new emails. Okay, well, I don't care about this one. Swipe this one to the side. Pop, you have 9 new emails. Swipe, pop, swipe, 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 swipe. You have 9 new emails. K9 and Thunderbird both do it. So hopefully they'll fix that eventually, because it's a pain. It's annoying. But other than that, it's a pretty good experience. And I am running it, and I like it.
I thought it's just all the spam you were getting every time you deleted one, a new one came in. But
I get quite a bit of spam too. The email address that I check with Thunderbird is my developer address. And so that's where I have GitHub assigned to. And there for a while, I was getting notifications on like every issue and pull request on a couple of repositories. So I would just, oh my God, I would get up in the morning and have 100 emails. It's like, oh, something had to change. But anyway, that idea of I have 9 new emails forever. You still have 9 new emails. Got to be a pain. So that's why I care about that particular little bug. It really annoyed me.
Yeah.
So I'm digging around in GitHub, and K9 is Thunderbird now.
Yes. They took the K9 project and they adopted it and put the Thunderbird name on it.
So why are you running 2 K9s? Why are you running Thunderbird K9 and Original K9?
Because I had everything set up with Original K9, and I got the notification that Thunderbird Beta was out. So I did the install and set it up. And so now they're both on there. Okay. Because it's a beta, I just haven't gone and uninstalled the original one yet.
Yeah. The interesting thing is that they changed the GitHub URLs, but not the code yet. So you go to Thunderbird Android, and the README says K9 Mail.
It takes time. It takes time to get all that done. Rebrand is a pain.
Yeah, just one quick sed.
Did you see the so there's the phonetic alphabet, right? Alpha, beta, Charlie, Delta, Echo, right?
Yes.
Amazon rebranded the Amazon Echo to the Amazon, Dot or whatever, something like that. They rebranded it. And now, if you ask your Amazon device to use that phonetic alphabet to spell something out. Whenever it goes to say an E instead of an echo, it now uses the new brand name of the Amazon device, because they literally just used said and replaced every time that echo was in there.
So it's Delta dot.
Pretty much, yes. I don't think it's actually dot. That's not what they called it, but yeah, it was hilarious.
You saying you think this is still the case?
I imagine they fixed it now that it's been announced, but
It's got to be one on YouTube or something.
it's got to be out there somewhere.
Yeah,
I saw it in a tweet, but it's very apropos to this conversation. All right, Jeff, you're on Ubuntu 24.10. You did it. You made the leap.
Well, kind of. Kubuntu.
Well, okay.
KDE. Yeah. So it's kind of a dual story. I kind of start out with what's going on, and then I transition kind of into my experience here. So, we had a very large release this week on Thursday, October 10th. Ubuntu 24.10 was released, which also includes the other flavors with different desktops. Now, this is a short-term release and only gets 9 months of updates before you need to upgrade to 25.04, which will be coming out in April of this next year. So this is not going to stick around for a lot. So they can be play a little fast and loose with this one. The installer is going to look very familiar to those who installed on 24.04, as there weren't really any changes. So while they've talked about moving the user account setup until after the system install, and there's some other stuff they talk about, but none of that happened in 24.10. So it's going to look just the exact same. When you first boot up, you'll run into, on proper Ubuntu, GNOME install setup, which is where the first time configuration is done. And this is for things like selecting a language, how you want to connect to the internet, picking a time zone, other things like that. GNOME 47 is the version included in this release. I won't go into the full details because, we've covered GNOME 47 on the show before, but some of the highlights are support for accent colors natively, excuse me, improved UI on low resolution displays, hardware encoded screen recorder, better GTK rendering on older hardware, and persistent remote login sessions. Either take a look at the link in the show notes or hit one of our older shows where we covered GNOME 47 for more under the hood details on GNOME. I didn't want to get too sidetracked on GNOME because
nobody cares about GNOME.
Yeah.
Yeah, because how long is GNOME going to be around? But we'll get to that later.
Nope. Nobody. GNOME's the desktops I've seen, Okay. Before I get too sidetracked, a new version comes with a new kernel, which is 6.11, which is the latest released kernel at this time. Now, we previously covered also how Canonical's really trying to keep the kernel fresher in its releases, so I won't go into all the details because we've covered it before, but as always, new kernels bring a lot of security fixes, new hardware support, expanded support for ARM and RISC-V chipsets, RISC-V, whichever way it is. And as a cherry on top, it also provides a good speed boost to the ext4 file system. Now, I'm going to veer off the article slightly and mention that I installed Kubuntu 24.10 this week, which is the KDE version of the Ubuntu release. Something that jumped out at me was when I started installing packages, and I noticed that apt had changed. Now, in the article, they mentioned that Ubuntu comes with apt 3.0, which is the command line package installer, deinstaller, whatnot. Now, I don't know if Ubuntu does come with 3.0 or not, but Kubuntu has 2.9.8, which is the development version that has all the upgrades in the interface. So basically, it's like 3.0, maybe just a few little tweaks behind, but you're basically there. And I got to say, I love the change. Rather than a large wall of text, like when you're going to install something, it breaks out the information into nice formatting. It started when I tried to install the NVIDIA drivers. It begins with a list of packages that are installed and no longer required. Then it's spaced out and says installing and lists the program or programs if there's more than one. Next, it lists the dependencies that it will install for those programs, and it clearly lists them out in a nice format. And there are different colors in here too, so it catches the eye a lot better. And below the below that are suggested packages to go with it, but it won't install them, but it lists them so that if you see something that catches your eye, you can install it. And finally, finally a summary of what it's doing before it goes into the actual install messaging that we're all used to. So once you say, yes, do this, you get all the normal wall of text, getting the code and preparing and unpacking and installing, just like the old app. But all the beforehand stuff is much better. Now, I did need to install the NVIDIA drivers because, as longtime listeners know, I have a green card. So I'm not running any AMD. And, when I was first booting, I had terrible experience with the new view drivers. The desktop would freeze every so often. You'd have to wait 3 to 5 seconds, then it would take off again. But I just put in the 560 drivers, rebooted, and it's beautiful. There are issues. Yes, there are. Some, like on Steam, some of the drop-down menus will garble for half a second before fixing themselves. In LibreOffice, when I was writing the show notes, I'd right-click, say, to spell correct a word, and the menu'd show up a few inches to the right of where I was actually clicking. Sometimes it was off the actual screen of the writer program, for example. I mean, it was still on the desktop, so I could easily just scroll over and select the menu item, but it was just a little glitch like that. But, other than paper cuts like these, which is what was it Nate Graham in his blog talks about paper cuts, where these are the kind of things it doesn't stop you from using the desktop. It's just like, oh, well, that's not quite right. So, and that's what they were. I haven't run into anything that stopped me from continuing to use the system. Nothing was groundbreaking that really stopped anything I had to do. Everything seems to work just fine. And they just released Plasma 6.2, so I'm expecting it won't take too long before it hits 2410. And I'll let everybody know as soon as there's a method for easily installing that without actually grabbing tar files and recompiling, or something easier for people that aren't coders. And for those who didn't realize why this is a big deal on Kubuntu, KDE is defaulting to Wayland on all GPUs now. So 6.1, Plasma 6 up, they're going all in on Wayland. They're really trying to leave X11 behind. So that's why this is such a big step. Now, Fedora's had it for a bit longer, but this is the Debian side of the house for making this jump. So far on 6.1, other than some minor glitches like I talked about, it's running as good as my X11 experience. Maybe a little better. Now this is all anecdotal, and maybe it's new, it's got to be cooler, but seems to be doing just fine. I would tell people to take a look at the article in the show notes for more details, as I've only lightly touched on a lot of things, and I totally skipped a lot of features and other upgrades just for the sake of brevity. You don't want to hear me talk for hours on end.
That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to start Rob on his diatribe. So, I would say also, if you've upgraded to 2410, any flavor, let me know how it's going, on our Discord server. Give it, just post in there of like, hey, what went right? What didn't go right? What do you like? I'd love to hear others' experiences with the 2410 upgrade.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Glad to hear that it is finally working. For the longest time, NVIDIA and Wayland just was not a thing. Like I think for a while there, it just would not even load the desktop at all. So it's great to hear.
I had problems where it would kind of load the desktop, but unless you were constantly moving the mouse, things didn't update. That. And it would just freeze, and then you have to shake the mouse, and then things would load and it would go. It was funny, but okay, it's got a 6.11 kernel, so it's got a new kernel. I'm running the 560 driver, which is the latest new feature released, non-beta driver from NVIDIA. 6.1, which is fairly recent release of Plasma, so it's all pretty new. So if you're not running the latest everything, you're your experience may not match what I'm seeing.
Is your NVIDIA set up a laptop or a desktop?
Desktop.
Okay. Because the part that keeps biting me is the Optimus, which is where it switches between integrated GPU and your discrete NVIDIA. And sometimes it'll work perfectly, and then I'll do some updates or something, and it'll break, and I won't know which did it, and then they'll start working. And it's just that's been a pain. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead.
Oh, I was going to just say that that's a good point. That I should mention I'm on a 4000 series card, so I've got fairly new hardware as well.
Can make a difference. Yeah, I know there's been potential solutions for the Optimus problem over the years. Like I think there was Bumblebee and all sorts of. It's a weird thing though, right? Like you've got your internal card, and most of the time it runs through that, but you've got to farm your GPU calls out to the external card and then copy the frame buffer back over. It's a weird system. It's pretty interesting that it works.
And this may tie into your video muxing story or previously, but the other thing you run into is when you've got multiple outs on your laptop. Some of them are hardwired to the internal GPU, and some of them are hardwired to the discrete GPU. And so to be able to use them both simultaneously with either driver, it's having to copy stuff back and forth all over the place and keep it straight. So
yeah, what fun! What fun!
Oh yeah.
All right, David, you want to talk about OpenRacer?
Sure.
We shaving the
No.
bearded quartet? No,
None of us are shaving.
Shaving.
No, we're talking about the Razer product line, which if you do any gaming on Linux or otherwise, any computer gaming, you are probably familiar with Razer. They make a lot of different products. I think they started with mice, gaming mice, and now they make keyboards and mouse pads and laptop coolers and all kinds of different devices. I specifically have one that's called the Orb Weaver. It's a left-handed keyboard that you can remap the keys. But OpenRazer is the software package that supports all of the configuration for the Razer devices. Razer is really big on RGB, the multicolor stuff. And so being able to go in and configure the device and turn the colors on and off and all that sort of stuff is built into OpenRazer. They've released 3.9 this week, and with it, they've released support for a bunch of new devices, along with still supporting all of the older devices. So if you game on Linux or have a Razer device, I actually use my Orb Weaver when I'm doing CAD drawing, because I can have a trackball in one hand and a keyboard in the other hand and do all of my CAD stuff much more efficiently that way. But if you have one of these devices, it's probably a product that you want to look into, or a software package you want to look into. But anyway, it just popped out there.
Yeah. Does this actually work without the kernel? Let's see. I think it's an out-of-tree kernel module that you had to run for at least some devices to work. Is it still the case?
I don't think they have support without the kernel module yet. I think it still depends on that.
Gotcha.
Which isn't ideal, but unless you ever get official support, you probably won't get there.
Yeah, interesting.
And I'm running a Death Adder mouse right now.
Okay.
Which is a Razer mouse.
Yeah, I don't use any of the Razer mice, but I've got a couple of the Razer keyboards around. One on the desktop behind me is a Razer still. Enjoy them quite a bit.
Buckling spring for the keyboards. Nothing else exists.
Yeah, it's the fake buckling springs, of course. But what you gonna do? Not everybody can afford one of the real ones.
They last forever.
Just about. They just about do. Yeah. All right, Rob, let's continue talking about GNOME and the GNOME Foundation.
Yeah, considering you always like to pick on my beloved GNOME, and you try to tell me how much better KDE is compared to GNOME.
That was up for debate.
Okay, so it seems you may be right, at least financially. Maybe GNOME isn't quite as good as KDE when you're talking about money. And although there have been some stories lately leading up to all this, with concerns them wanting more money, but now that their fiscal year has started, October 1st, which is an odd time for a fiscal year to start, I think, but maybe that's part of the problem. Now that fiscal year has started, they have had to take some actions because their fundraising wasn't where it was hoped to be. So they've announced some cutbacks, and the first cutback on their list is they let go of their creative director. And I'm sure Jonathan has some smug comments to say about that. But
I'll be nice.
Yeah, what kind of creative? Yeah, anyway. Next on their list is letting go of their director of community development. And, I didn't think about it when I was writing up my notes, but I know Jonathan has had some comments in the past about their community involvement and at least to the respect of how they listen to or don't listen to their community, perhaps. But to save some money, they're also making adjustments to event organization and representation, marketing initiatives, fundraising efforts, which hopefully they're increasing that, and graphic design. Fortunately, this isn't going to be affecting their key events such as LAS, GNOME Asia, and Guadict, as these still probably pay for themselves. Lots of big conferences often do, but I find it odd that even though GNOME seems to be the flagship choice for the majority of distributions out there, it's odd that they're still financially struggling more than KDE. Is it because none of the distributions are chipping in to help GNOME at all? I get if the little guys aren't helping at all, but I would expect the likes of Canonical, IBM to, maybe be providing some financial support, or now Rocky with their big $25,000 non-support support agreement, or are they just spending too much money? It'd be interesting to compare the two side by side to see what they're bringing in, what they're spending. I would think GNOME would be good. Maybe they've just upset too many in the community, with some of their direction that they've gone. I don't know, but their financial woes are shown to be true, not just rumors, and they make a cutback. So hopefully that doesn't hurt the actual desktop environment, which some of us still think is pretty good, because I prefer my desktop environment default not to look like Windows.
There's this new one called Cosmic that you might want to try out.
And that very well might be what I go to when that's completed.
Out of beta, yeah. There's an interesting question here that I think maybe is the most interesting thing to talk about, and that is, if the GNOME Foundation goes away completely, what becomes of GNOME? And I think the answer is the people that are not getting paid to develop GNOME, which I don't know that the GNOME Foundation is actually paying any developers, which maybe is part of the problem.
Just directors.
Yeah, literally. Like that would be the problem with one of these organizations when they work that way. Like, that would be the problem. Anyway, if the GNOME Foundation goes away, GNOME will continue. It'll just be run by the people writing the code, and the source code does not go away. It's on, it's people have it in their Git repositories. It's probably on GitHub. It's, or GitLab, wherever they run it. the source code doesn't go away. People will be able to continue to work on it. You may see a situation where there's a couple of forks of it, and it takes a little while to figure out, all right, this is the fork that's going to carry the flag and going to be the official GNOME going forwards. But
I wonder if it would stop being the flagship for a number of distributions.
Well, so I mean, at first, probably what would happen would be you would have those distributions would have their own fork of it. Like Fedora, Red Hat, they would almost certainly have a local fork of GNOME if GNOME itself kind of went away. But the point really they want to make there is there's no need to there's no particular reason to fret over this. Like GNOME is not going for those few of you that really like GNOME. You don't have to get worried; it's not going away.
Both of you are fine.
Yeah, both of you are fine.
Their new executive director, I think that's the title. Whoever's leading the foundation now, they plan to they're working on some new strategic plans to keep things going with them at the helm. So yeah, strategy would be good. I'll have to think about all of that stuff for a little while.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head too.
Spend some time thinking about how you got into this situation.
I think you hit the nail on the head too. Is kind of one of the questions: is what are they making? Are they trying to keep up with the Mozilla Foundation with their person in charge, or is it really a shoestring budget that?
I haven't had a chance to look, but I remember when we looked at KDE's budget not too long ago because they made less. I can't remember what it was, but it was.
They ran a deficit. They ran a deficit for a year.
They ran a deficit. That's what it was. Yeah. But they were only like $400,000 a year, give or take, which doesn't sound like a lot for.
It's a lot for an individual, but a small amount for an organization. Yes.
Right.
Well, and they had quite a bit of money in the coffers too, I believe. So it wasn't that big of a.
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah, their deficit wasn't really a problem. It was a problem of having extra money saved up they had to spend.
It's always
quite a different problem, but I don't know. I don't know if it's out there or not, but I should look it up. Hadn't had a chance after I read this, but I'm real curious. Like, is their budget around that 400,000, or is it less, or is it like 2 million? Well, actually, I want to say. I thought there were some stories about the past executive director and how much they got paid, and I almost feel like that was close to 400,000 alone. But I could be imagining things.
I don't remember. I don't remember how much it is.
So we that with Google or something.
Or you're thinking of Mozilla, where the person was making a crap ton of money. They became a consultant, or they had another position. Still making that same amount, they brought somebody new in making just an ungodly amount of money as well.
Yeah, I could be thinking about that completely.
Yeah, sometimes those sorts of things, the organization can take on a life of its own, and so then you have fewer and fewer people working on the code and more people caring about the organization. And
I know the last one was like some kind of yogi or something, but
a shaman. She was a shaman.
There we go.
Professional shaman. Lots of people looked at that and had questions. Apparently validated questions at this point, but
they didn't even make it a year.
Yeah.
Maybe, I mean, I don't know how their finances were in the past, but maybe there's a reason they only made it a year, and at this moment they're making a cutback. So maybe they didn't run it too well this past year.
I would say so. All right, let's talk about a company that is run well. Jeff?
AMD? Yeah. Well, there's many different levels to that, and I'm like, well, I'm sure he means me, but that's a tough segue there. There's some good branches and some bad branches in that, but
I mean, you talk about the whole company of AMD, and you talk about Lisa Su, and just a spectacular CEO. Made some amazing gains at AMD over the 10 years she's been running it.
Yeah, I've said this many times. I think you need a technology person in a technology company just to help guide the direction. Mm-hmm. I think there's a few examples we can give where they had business people running companies and that didn't fare so well because they didn't understand the technology. But I digress. A lot of the press this week was about Intel announcing their new 200S series of processors, which we won't actually see until the end of the month. But at the same time, AMD had an advancing AI event where they announced their 5th generation EPYC Turin processors with up to 192 cores and 384 threads per socket. Now, it comes with a 70% IPC instruction per clock uplift and AVX 512 instructions with a full 512-bit data path, along with the general Zen 5 architecture improvements. In the show notes, I've linked 2 articles. The first one discusses the launch of the new CPU and includes a couple different benchmark links. And, I'll cut to the chase and just say that in general, the new chips are beasts and provide really good competition for Intel counterparts. Which one comes out on top depends on the workload you have. So you'll want to look at the cornucopia benchmarks that Michael Larrable over at Phronix has run. For example, Intel does a little better with some of the memory access. They have a little higher speed, but some of the computational stuff, AMD comes out on top. So it's going to be very specific. But if you're buying one of these processors, you probably have a very specific workload in mind. Now I will say, with that statement, AMD does have one win hands down, and that's in price. So while a 192-core AMD EPYC costs $14,813, the Intel equivalent goes for $17,800. So this is not for grandma's computer. The second article in the show notes is where things get interesting. Michael looks at the AVX 512 performance with a 256-bit data path versus a 512-bit data path for the new EPYC CPUs. Michael mentions in his articles that while he enjoys benchmarking, his true love is examining very specific details of the processor, such as a change in data path. He says there's going to be a lot more benchmarks in the future to look at the small details in the chips and find out how much performance and improvement is packed into this new generation. So he really likes looking under the hood in the details versus just overall flat performance. Now, on Zen 4 chips, when they've used AVX 512 instructions, they double pumped or had to use 2 cycles to execute one instruction because they didn't have the data path to do it all at once. It was a 256-bit wide data path. With the Zen 5 chips, you can execute the AVX 512 instructions all at once. Now, you can change how that runs. So you can run them all at once. You can double pump like the older Zen architecture or completely turn off the instruction set. So Michael has all 3 modes in his benchmarking to look at the difference, not only in the improvements of the data path, but also in how much performance the AVX 512 instructions actually give in specific workloads. So just to be doubly clear, this is the same CPU. He just, in software, in the BIOS, controlled what mode the CPU ran in. So when looking at the benchmark results, having the AVX 512 instructions greatly increased performance in certain workloads and yielded a 1.45x performance increase compared to not having access to the instructions. Having the full 512-bit data path gave a 1.12x performance increase. So while having the instructions execute in one cycle was very good for performance, having them available overall was even more important. So even if you have to double pump the instruction, that's better than not having it at all. Now, keep in mind, some of these tests could have been limited by other parts of the CPU, such as computation time or memory bottlenecks. So when you see a benchmark where the wider pipe doesn't seem to help that much, it was either, at worst, it was on par with the double pump. A lot of times it was faster. But if you see a match, it could be why, because it was bottlenecked somewhere else. If it's waiting for memory, well, it can spend those 2 cycles to double pump the AVX 512 instruction, and it's going to be hidden behind you're still waiting on memory. When comparing the results, the clock speed didn't change, the CPU power consumption did not change, and the temperature measured in the chips did not change. So turning on the instructions and having them run at full width pipeline didn't make any noticeable difference. So hence, there's no reason not to run it in full 512-bit mode unless you have a specific compatibility reason. Otherwise, just let the full 512 bus fly. Take a look at the articles linked in the show notes for all the benchmarks and the details you'd ever want to know about the new EPYC CPUs and how they compare with the latest Intel competition, which Intel released their server chips here, I think about a month ago. It was pretty recently, and the older generation AMD chips. And maybe there's a future upgrade coming your way for our enterprise people.
Yeah, so there's some really interesting things with AVX 512. For the longest time, it used to be, AVX 512, that's just for the math stuff. You math nerds doing big science. That's all that cares about it. But people have discovered some interesting little optimizations you can do. Like, you can do string compares with the AVX 512 instructions. And if you do the math, that's like 32 characters at a time you can load into one of those 512-bit registers. It's pretty big. And the idea is then that you could do that entire string compare with a single instruction rather than a loop where you loop all the way through it one at a time. And that's a pretty big speed up. I found one article, somebody working on this, and he found like a 5x speed up of doing string compares using AVX 512. So like, this is not something that nobody uses. It's actually some really, really useful instructions. So some very cool stuff.
And there is some video compression, decompression they're doing with AVX 512. There's, of course, AI is getting used by it. And then, like you said, the normal math, we're doing fluid analysis or simulations or, the super sciencey stuff as well.
Yeah.
But that's where it comes in for us, like, say, the video on some things that you can compress, decompress. It's in the normal Ryzen chips too. So the 9000 series and the 7000, I don't remember if the 5 had it or not, but they support, the consumer level supports AVX 512, where Intel does not on their consumer chips. But we'll see if the 200S coming out, we'll see if they've changed their mind and support it now.
Yeah, that'll be something if they don't support it and they go back to supporting it after pressure from AMD.
Yeah.
Interesting times. All right, let's talk about the Berkeley packet filter. What does the E stand for? Embedded?
No, extended.
Extended, that's right. It's coming to Windows?
It is. And it's well on its way. It's actually being done completely in the open, which is quite interesting. I've got a link to an article from the New Stack in talking about the virtual eBPF summit last month. CTO and co-founder of IO Surveillant, Thomas Graf, talked about the future of the open source filter turned kernel engine. And so to back up a little bit, BPF is the Berkeley packet filter. It was originally designed to capture packets and let you specify a filter at the kernel level without having to actually modify the kernel directly. So it created a sandboxed, safe way of getting just the data that you needed out of the kernel and back into it. And then it was extended into eBPF, and since it has really taken on a life of its own, it is to quote the article here, since its inclusion in the kernel a decade ago, the Linux-based eBPF has found widespread adoption, particularly for observability, security, and compliance tools that benefit from its programmable inline speed to analyze and filter packets without the need for cumbersome modules or dangerous kernel modifications. And the interesting thing about packets here is it's data packets. So while it was originally written specifically for networking, they've extended it. It has its purpose has grown over time. And so it's not just data packets, but it's almost anything in the kernel you can get access to through eBPF. I'm operating at the edge of my own experience. I haven't done any kernel development myself. I tend to operate in higher levels than that. But it's very interesting. I find it very interesting for a couple of reasons. So there is a GitHub project. They got 43 contributors. It's an official Microsoft project. There's a link to it in the article. And it is bringing eBPF to Windows. It's going to bring bytecode compatibility with Linux eBPF. Some of the hook points may be different because Windows system calls are different than Linux system calls. But the Internet Engineering Task Force, IETF, is getting involved because they're embarking on a project to solidify the interface so that it can guarantee as much cross-platform compatibility as possible. So going forward, this should allow packet filter authors to create code that's cross-platform. The other thing, I didn't see it in the article, but just kind of listening to what's going on and stuff, with the big issues that came out of the CloudStrike incident where all the machines crashed, and then concern being raised about having ring zero access in the kernel and everything. eBPF could be an answer that allows antivirus tools to intercept and act on security issues without having the ability to crash the kernel. So it's an interesting project. It's good to see it being done. Microsoft has taken open source in the past and used it themselves. I mean, we were actually talking about that earlier with the NT network driver. But this is an example where they're keeping their development in the open source ecosystem, and they're doing it themselves, but then they're also encouraging involvement from the community. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with this.
So if that can work with antivirus or help that connection there, how about anti-cheat?
It's a possibility, I guess, but
It's possible.
yeah.
There's another idea here that really intrigues me, and that is, can you make code that would work on both Linux and Windows in eBPF?
You're supposed to be able to.
And then what all can you do with that? Can you then, if you write an antivirus that uses eBPF, can you then write a cross-platform antivirus that uses the same driver for Windows systems and Linux systems? Like that's really fascinating. That's a really interesting idea.
I don't know enough to answer that question, but it is an interesting food for thought.
Yeah, some very, very cool potential there, and hopefully things will happen as a result. I like it. All right, shall we get into some tips? I would say command line tips, but I am the one this week that is bringing a GUI tip.
Oh,
I know. It's a fun one though. It's one that I've used. We're gonna let Rob start off, and you're looking for something.
Yes. Look at what I have to show you. So my command line tip this week, because everyone I kept trying to do before it somehow got stolen. In fact, one right at the same time as I was ready to type it into the show notes, somebody else already took it. And I don't know how that works out. But anyway, look is my command. So look, just as it sounds, LOOK. If it's used alone without any files, you can use it to do dictionary lookup. So let's just say, let me get over here to here. For those watching, I'm going to type look Apple. And it's going to look up in the dictionary all the things that it matches. Now, you can also look at a file. So if I do look, let's do David and file.txt, and it didn't find anybody there. Don't know why. Let's do Jeff. Let's try -F. Okay, I don't know why it's not finding anybody there. What am I doing wrong here?
You did something wrong.
I have a file here.
Maybe cat the file.
All right. So I did a look J. So it's only going to go to the beginning of my file. And I don't know what's wrong with my file because I know it has David at the beginning of the file in some spots. If I do look J and then file that text, the ones that have start with a J. So Jonathan is the best. And then Jeff is okay. Or if I just change that to Jeff, and I don't understand what's going on there at all. It worked for me earlier when I was playing around with this. So if I do a -F, that's supposed to be case insensitive. Whereas without the -F, and you're supposed to be able to look in files with this too. Otherwise, by default, it just looks at your dictionary. So if I do look tree, it's gonna, show everything that starts with a tree. So tree, treeing, treeless. Now, if I do look Linux, what a stupid dictionary. Apparently, Linux is not in the Linux dictionary.
Well, it's a proper term. It's a proper noun. It's not a regular noun.
How about this then? Look, John. Look, John is in there. How about Jeff? No, Jeff is not in there.
Ken, next week, when you come back, would you show Rob the man command so he can properly learn this?
So let's so this is supposedly the proper way to use it. Usually I just use it as a dictionary thing. But when I looked it up, I said, hey, you can look at files too. If you do a --help, you're supposed to be able to do the options, the string, and the file. So there's a look command to look on the dictionary. And you can try to figure out if the other cases actually work or not.
I bet there's something going on here where you need to put your string in quotes, or it's getting the space in there too, or something something weird.
I used TLDR, reference to a command we've mentioned in the past, and it notes the lines in the file must be sorted for look to work.
Oh,
Interesting.
And remember, Rob, a good retort never begins with "oops."
Alphabetically sorted?
I don't know. It just says the lines in the file must be sorted.
I don't know.
It worked before we went live.
Of course.
It works great still to look. My initial intention here was just to look at the dictionary. And I thought I'd throw in this other stuff too, since I read that that's there, and I don't understand it, I guess.
All right, Jeff, let's hope your demo, if you have one, works better than that.
I don't. I just have a description.
Probably for the best.
Yeah. Sometimes in our Linux lives on the command line, we want to not run cutting edge or have the latest software because it breaks something or causes a compatibility issue with something else. And, sure, you can get in there, and if you were really wanted a painful way to do it, you could update every package one by one. But, oh my gosh, that would be terrible. And especially based on how big of an update and the dependencies that you can get into, not really feasible. Well, if you look at the article in the show notes, it will tell everyone, the people that use Yum and DNF package managers, so looking at you, Fedora and Red Hat, how to keep the versions right where you want. So the first option is to use the exclude command and this applies to both DNF and Yum, in the config file, which will always exclude the pattern you've defined. And this is the most blanket approach and will exclude the software until you go and edit the config file again. And directions are all, there's slight differences between Yum and DNF, but it's all listed in the article in the show notes. The second is the -- exclude in the command line itself. And this will exclude the specific package or packages each time you run the command. So you say you're going to do an update, you just put in the option with exclude whatever that is. The third way is to exclude a specific package in a specific repository by editing the repository configuration file. So this maybe is you've got a repository or two repositories that have the same file, and you want to make sure you've got one coming from, maybe a modified version of something. Well, I'll just make something up like OBS, and you want to make sure you're not getting the standard repository, but you're getting an optional one that includes a bunch of great stuff that you want. So you do that with using that repository configuration file. And the final way is there's a version lock to hold a package at a specific version. You do need to install this plugin, and for example, in DNF, it would be sudo space DNF space install space DNF dash plugins dash core. And there's no space in that last part. And this will let you lock a specific package, and you can also use it to look at the versions you have and unlock when you're ready to get updates for the package again. So again, take a look at the article linked in the show notes for the full details on the command line instructions and to get a better control of your updates. So part 2 will be next week, where we look at things on the app side of the house.
I have seen the yum config file get used for things like the ARM boards, where a vendor will give you something that runs on their own kernel, but with a Fedora user space. And so that sort of thing, it's pretty useful to be able to lock your kernel to only grab their kernel versions rather than the ones from Fedora. Because in a lot of those cases, the one from Fedora will just not work and not boot on your machine because ARM. It's fun. All right, David, let's keep an eye on some progress.
Sure. And I also have a real-time demo here. I did a screen share. Do you have that?
Oh, do I?
It's showing up for me here in Restream.
See, and that's why I don't have a live demo, because I love our listeners. Not just only the viewers. I love
there
the
it
listeners
is.
too.
There it is. We got it.
Okay.
It was user error on my part.
Let's see here. I guess. All right. So, what I've got is the PV command, which is specifically for monitoring the progress of data through a pipe. And there's a lot of different things you can do with it. And for whatever ironic reason, Rob and I both picked the same command this week, but I got it entered first into our show notes, so I got to do it. But there's a lot of stuff you can do with this. So there may be other things that Rob brings back later. All that I wanted to show with it is 3 or 4 weeks ago, Ken was demoing a command, and he was showing unplugging and plugging USB devices, and he was scrolling his D-message and plugged it in, and the thing scrolled off the screen too quickly. And I was like, hey, there's got to be a way in those sorts of situations when you're trying to demo something or show something where you can slow down the output. So I went and did some searching, and you can do that with PV. So for example here, I've got a test file. So if I cat test, it's blank. So if I tail, I'm going to use a few different commands here, obviously. If I tail /f test, which -f follows, so it's going to keep watching it. And then I come over here and I'm using tmux, which I've talked about before. And I cat War and Peace Book 1 into test. It instantly happens. And you see that we're down at the end of it. But if you, and I've got the command up here already.
Spoilers.
Spoilers what?
Let's get into the book. I know how it ends now.
Oh, well, that's just book 1. There's like 972 of them dang things. So if I do the tail F test again, but this time I pipe it into PV with -Q lowercase l, uppercase L13. And I have these commands listed, or these options listed out in the show notes, but Q is quiet because one of the things PV, it's about monitoring progress of data through a pipe. So one of the things it has by default is a progress meter. We don't care about the progress meter in this case. Second, as with most things dealing with pipes, it defaults to dealing in bytes. So the lowercase l tells it to worry about lines. And then the uppercase L is your rate limit. So in this case, I want 13 lines per second. So if I do that, and first it caught up to where I was because I didn't empty the file out. Now if I do this cat, it happened instantly, but it's relatively slowly putting it out on the screen. And if I come back over here and kill that and drop it back to like 1 a second, you'll see that it's painfully slow, but still it's as a proof of concept there. And tail by default shows the last 10 lines of the file before it starts following. So that's why it's already throwing some things out there. So anyway, that's PV. You can do a lot of different stuff with it. I first ran into PV, just as a note for future expansion. I had a long copy process using CP, and CP does not have a progress bar built into it. So one of the ways you can get progress for CP is by sticking a PV pipe in your CP to monitor the progress. But anyway, that's PV.
Very cool. Yeah. Neat. That button? No. How do I get back? Technology, man. All
Turn
right.
it to 11.
Yeah, we just did. So I've got a command line tip for you that is actually, well, you can run it on the command line. I run it on the command line, but it will start a graphical program, and that's Bless. And so this is a graphical hex editor. So if you need to look at the actual bytes, the bits and bytes of something, you can open it with Bless. And it's not the only hex editor, but the last time that I needed to do something with a binary file, Bless was the first thing that came to mind, and it's what I used, and it's actually a pretty good experience. It's very, very fast, even with opening, fairly large files. But you can search within the file you can search by hex, you can search by string. I believe you can also search by a binary pattern, by the bits themselves, as it were. So if you've got a binary, you need to look inside of it to see what's going on. Bless. It's quite good. It'll give you, like, in one screen, you'll see the raw hex, and then it'll try to give you the equivalent ASCII text over on the other side. And then some more information down at the bottom. You can select and copy. It'll give you stats about the stuff you selected. Super useful little tool for messing around with the binary files. So, Bless. There you go.
Awesome.
All right, that is it. That is the show. We have some ending notes that we want to make. And for those of you watching live, something super exciting that I am super excited about, and that is Starship launch. Starship Flight 5 is tomorrow. And regardless of what happens, it's going to be exciting because they're going to try to catch the thing. So if you're in time and you want to be up with me at like 6:45 Central Time a.m. to watch it, I will definitely be tuned in. I will let each of the other guys get the last word or make a note or whatever they want to.
When you say catch it, that's the one with the chopsticks, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. The booster is going to try to fly back, and they're going to try to catch it with the chopsticks at the launch tower. It's going to be exciting, regardless of what happens. All right, Rob, anything you want to plug?
So I did play around with my command line tip, and the stuff in the file that you're looking at has to be in alphabetical order. So it's more useful if you have a text file that is a list and that's sorted in alphabetical order. Then it works just fine. I figured that out after I rearranged it. So thanks for that little hint, David, I think that was.
So next week, Rob's going to cover the sort command.
Have we done that yet?
I don't know, but
Yes.
if we haven't, somebody needs to.
Yeah. I was going to go a different route with my PV command, so we'll see. Maybe I'll add on to that in the future. And
Sure.
I was going to have a little more fun with it. That's what I do. I have fun. But anyway, on to my normal close. Come connect with me. RobertPCampbell.com is where you can find me. I've had, at least over this past week, at least a half a dozen new Mastodon followers. And anyway, once you go to my website, RobertPCampbell.com, you can find links to my LinkedIn, my little Twitter birdie, which, like I said before, I don't really use much, but you can connect with me there just for status symbol stuff, Say, hey, I'm connected with this guy. He's cool. Mastodon, that's where I do post at least sometimes. And if you want to buy me those 5,000 coffees so I can get that Rocky subscription, that's right here where you can donate a coffee to me. Have a good week, all.
All right. And David.
Oh, I will just plug the usual, and that is if you are listening to us and not getting to watch us, then that means you're not a member of the club. So you should come join Club TWiT. And also, if you like all things open source, you should go check out Floss Weekly. It's another awesome place. So those will be my 2 plugs for this week.
All right. And Jeff.
Quick note here. Rob should check out show number 29, where I did the sort command a while ago. So already been done. Other than that, I don't have anything else to plug. So haiku time. Not a pretty sight. When the web dies screaming loud, the site is not found. Have a great week, everybody.
Fun. All right. Thank you guys for being here. And thank you to everyone that caught us live, those that watch us on the download. We sure appreciate your support, the support for TWiT. And we will see you next week on the Untitled Linux Show.